The Tale of Gryn Galdson by Leonardo Garza. Foreword. This tale is one I hold very dearly in my heart, despite its tragic nature. As of writing this, November 3rd, 2023, it's been around a year and a month since I first unfolded this story onto paper. Surprisingly enough, despite its limited nature, it allowed me to expand the universe in which this tale is set. This I can only thank to Mexican contemporary author and literature teacher Carlos Calles, who helped me massively on improving its structure and overall purpose. Chapter 1. The Tale of Gerleif Galdson. Some tales have come from the land of Noland, the island which is upon the western coast of Elsar. These tales have run like gunpowder on the wind, but have reached the ears of the drinking folk of many other lands around the great blue seas. One of such is the stories of Gryn Galdson. He was a mighty king in the south of that island, and had the virtue of being the lord of one of the only unified kingdoms in that land. When the 50-year-long reign of Gerleif Galdson was coming to its end, so was his kingdom's peace. He was invited to a tower nearby his realm's capital to attend a meeting with Sir Salar, he the lord of Fortress Saliera, far to the north of the island. They were to talk for countless hours, negotiating the integration of his fortress to the mighty kingdom of Noland. Gerleif was a man of visible authority. Around his realm and everywhere else his might was not compared, for no other kingdom there was as large as his. Although greed and vanity were part of most of his persona, he will do anything to fight and protect his lands and his people, not because the loss of his riches was at play, but because he was fond of his folk, and they were fond of him, perhaps even deeper than the other way around. He saw Sir Salar's opportunity not as a chance to increase his wealth, but to find a connection to a much larger network of smaller kingdoms around the island, where were now to be allied with him. The ride across the Berglands was a peaceful one for now. It was a perfect plain towards the horizon, and it was complemented by the sweet and soft hills over here and there, covered by flowers of all colors that commemorated a beauty that jerked out tears of Gerleif's glassy eyes. It was a spectacle every time he went out walking from his capital, and it didn't matter if he stayed there to watch it all unfold before his very eyes, for the valley's beauty never finished. He looked everywhere, north, south, east, and west, and the green plains never burned him out. The top of the Tower of Ilsidor unfolded before his sight, and as he rode towards it, its symmetry complemented the valley in a satisfying way that sent shivers down Gerleif's spine. To the left the valley went on, endless, and to the right a dense green forest was planted, and in the middle of both there was a path towards the keep of the tower. Yet a feeling of strangeness began to creep into the back of Gerleif's mind. Something was near. Someone was near. Whatever could it be? Leaps began to move from the forest, a terrifying sound at its devilish pitch crept into the ears of the mighty lord, bringing into him a sense of ancient horrors that were thought to be forgotten forever. Suddenly from the forest came a host of 9 dark riders. Perhaps they were bandits. All of them wore dark masks, of infernal designs beyond one's understanding. And each of the bandits rode a dark steed, of rancid odor and incomprehensible aura. The mightiest of these men stood from his horse, and in a low dark speech he spoke to Gerleif. "You are now surrounded, Lord of the Berglands. You must know that thy reign is ended, and rebellion shall now break inside thy halls, and all shall be hidden from you." And Gerleif responded, saying, "Now what have you done to my lands, Henda, son of Hand? What have you done to my family, my son even? You are nothing but an odd civilian of the northern lands of barbaric virtue, where the cost of their soul meet their crude end. The quicker you answer me, the better it is. I repeat to you, barbarian, what have you done to my people?" Hendo, while still in his dark facade, chuckled and spoke to him and said mid-laugh, Gerleif, my dear, your son is dead. and you will be too if nobody comes to your aid in the next hour. The time is ticking. Pray. Gerleif awaited, swaying in dismay and anger. He saw as the bandits slowly but surely took out their swords and pointed them towards him. In cold blood he awaited the moment where they swung them, ending his anxiety forevermore. The clock ticked and ticked. An hour has now passed. Hendo drew his sword, which unfolded before him a dark smoke and the speech of a perished soul, speaking in despair towards Gerleif. "You are done, Gerleif," the sword spoke. "My sharpness forgives, but my handler does not." "You are perished, Gerleif, son of Heldorf," said Hendo. "The halls of my people will remember through the ages uncounted the moment when we halted the bloodline of the kingdom of Noland, descendants of the line of Elsar. Our people will remember the moment when darkness halted the power of God upon the island of Dersul forever." But as Hendo took firmly his sword with his right hand and swung it to cut Gerleif's head, a horn was heard. It was a perfect fifth. A mighty sound came out of the dense woods, as this prefecture of sound itself went through the ears of the bandits and of the old king. A muster of 100 men or more was revealed, with 2 men at the front. He who was clad in brown tunic was Alura Arendor, the mage, and he who was clad in grey armor was Gryn Galdson. He was there! The heir of Noland was there, for Hendo persuaded the old king into believing that there was no hope left in his beloved realm, and that him returning into his kingdom to receive aid will be of no use. Gryn Galdson spoke to Hendo in a serious manner. "Do you think it is amusing to watch your rival die a horrendous death? I will think of you as a reasonable person with decent morals, but northern barbarians of your kin have no understanding of common sense, so it seems. We have come to save my father. Spare him, for we have come to save him." Hendo kicked Gerleif, who wailed, and the dark mask scoffed, and said to the young lord, "Do you think I will give such power so freely? Do you think I will not go this far, all the way from the kingdom of Nelgador to your southern lands that smell of hot garbage, and not kill your king? Do you think us mighty northern folk have care for each other? If you wish to save your father from a horrendous death, then you will need to walk over my dead body, and the blood of my trusty 8 knights that accompany me in this journey, just to save your father." Gryn and his father were astonished as they heard the words of Hendo the bandit. How was it possible that he would give up his life so freely? How was it possible that he would define the terms and conditions of Gerleif's freedom by a duel to the death? Will the son fight to the death for the life of his father? As Gryn stepped 1 foot to go and challenge Hendo, Gerleif stood and yelled at his son, saying, "No, son! You are the heir of the house of Galdson. A house of might and power is not compared, not here, not in Elsar, not anywhere. You do not deserve to die in a battle against such horrible men, but against your kin that you respect. Leave this challenge to me. I shall fight for my freedom." All were impressed by his words. With a gesture of confidence, Hendo backed down and told all his guards to back down as well, for he knew that he could battle him alone. Hendo had no trust for the aging king to thrive in battle, and neither did the Nolandian soldiers. Age had hit him hard through the passing of time, and he was not a strong warrior like he was when he was young. Gerleif's eyes traveled throughout the weapons he held, his wrinkly fingers softly kissing the cold and ragged hilt of his sword, and to the sturdy and weathered surface of his wooden shield. Hendo, on the other hand, with confidence in his eyes, only held his dark-spirited sword, its dark blade shimmering across the valley. Tension filled the air. With swiftness the old king gripped his sword and shield, their weight reassuring in his weathered hands. Yet in the heat of the moment his grip failed him, and both weapons suddenly clashed upon the dirty ground. His terrified eyes now narrowed with determination as he opened his hands before the heavens. Suddenly, as if an act of his own will, a metallic bat summoned in the air, its iron gleaming menacingly while it flew across the valley. With a fierce confidence, he gripped his fingers across the hilt, his arms tensing, and he swung it with a deadly precision. Its swing was ended with a resounding thud, striking Hendo just above his left eye. To the stricken head of Hendo, the earth blurred into one chaotic and painful whirlwind of disorientation, ringing with the virtue of a church bell after the blow of the mightiest of hammers. And even before he could react, thought slipped away, leaving him prostrated in the ground, unconscious and crumpled. Now a battle had ensued, where the now 8 dark bandits fought against the hundreds of soldiers loyal to the captive king. With great fervor and anger they fought for their lives and their esteemed leaders. Garlife fought alongside his son. Hendo still lay in the ground during the battle, unconscious, without the help of his faithful fighters. Amid the battle, Allura woke up to him, and with his magic he sent him towards the northern lands, to never return. Garlife unfortunately died during the battle. He was stabbed by a sword from behind, and he spoke no last word. He was strong, but his age could not stand the might of the dark knights of Hendo. In the end, all the northern bandits were killed. Few casualties were inflicted on the Nulandians, but with Garlife's death, all the power now shifted to his unready son, Gryn Galdson. Hendo was prostrated in the north, near the cliffs of the northern coastline, which met the cruel end of the island of Darsul. Garlife's son was now safe, so he was crowned king, under the names Gryn Galdson, son of Garlife Galdson, Lord of the Berglands, King of the South. Chapter 2. The Tale of Gryn Galdson. Ever since Gryn's childhood, he had been friends with a man named Selkar. They were second cousins. The genealogies go as such, where Gryn's great-grandfather had 2 sons, the first named Heldorf, who gave life to his son Gerleif. The second was named Hithaelir, who gave life to Mod, and he to Selkar. That was a kingly name, for many annals before him mentioned the name in only holy conventions and mannerisms. Selkar and Gryn were the best of friends in life and in death. They once took upon the quest to cross the great river towards the Midlands and to find themselves in the fjords of that place. The task did not go well for them, but they came out alive and sane. Selkar's curiosity gave him a great personality, and Gryn was a major factor in that. But sadly, after a few years, their friendship started to fall apart. They were still friends, but they decided that their ways must now become separate, and to move on to different kingdoms. Gryn stayed as king of Noland. Selkar began to reign a small kingdom of his own, called the Kingdom of Geomont, where among many other things he held the island's biggest library. Magic was there too, yet on a smaller scope. Yet the knowledge of all magic in the face of the earth was not Selkar's greatest and mightiest possession, for the title will go to the Axelas stone. With it, he could go to the hidden realm of Axelas, where no greatness lives, where hot lakes of sulfur reign everywhere, and where the Dark Lord reigns supreme. One day, Gryn met with Selkar near the gates of the Kingdom of Geomont, where they decided that the Southern King will purchase from his friend the passage to the Hellish Realm for an extended price. Both were glad with this deal, for the stone indeed holds a magical power that is not given to anyone in the world. Yet now it was not children business. This was a truthful problem to the people of the Southern Kingdom. They weren't fond of their esteemed king to be trading with unfaithful northerners, for the Battle of Ilsidor had brought upon the people of Noland a feeling of hatred and remorse against the bandits, and anyone from the north in general. So when news arrived to the Nolandians that Gryn had traded with a northerner, outrage sprang out among his halls, and everything was hidden from them. Fights became into protests, protests into riots and riots into revolution. The fight hit the hull of the Galdsons with a strength unexpected, and it was all against all. The then exiled Hendo had returned to his most unwanted enemy's land and rigged the doors of the castle of Gryn's property. That did not kill the king, yet a bystander which was not on the intention of the northern bandit. So Gryn was forced into exile by the people of his own kingdom, and all the fortresses and the towers fell into ruin. Nobody was safe in the once great kingdom of Noland, so all left those lands for good. The lost king became a wolf tamer, and in the process he gathered a pack of 16 wolves that were always on his side. In his time of exile, Gryn traveled alongside a man named Malneris, he too from the Berglands, and a veteran of the revolution. The latter had been trying to find his lost lord for the last 3 months, to no avail. It was his quest to find the king again, to find the Axelas stone. "At last have I found thee, my lord," said Malneris. "After 3 months of search, from day and night through stone and sand, I have found you." "It is a pity that we find ourselves in horrible times of war," said Gryn. "The kingdoms of the north have done no good to us, and I am always threatened of assassination." "That is no good, my lord," said Malneris. "But everything aside, come with me, my lord. I have found refuge in the northern fortress owned by Lady Saliera." "Excellent, but have you spoken with her?" asked Gryn. "They might be a foe to us." "Sir Salar knew us well, my lord. That knowledge and confidence he passed on to his daughter, Lady Saliera. She will most warmly welcome us into her halls." So the two traveled far and wide to search the fortress of Lady Saliera. They went over hilltops and rills, and upon midday they arrived to the castle. "Who goes by here, lurking around my fort?" said Saliera. "It is I, Malneris, and I come with Gryn, lord of the kingdom of the south. We have come here for refuge, and to heal the wounds of Gryn from his exile." "Fabulous. However, you may enter with care, as I have set up a trap upon the door to battle against the kingdom of Nelgador," said Saliera. "What is this trap you talk about? Is there anything I should avoid?" "There is a thin tripwire upon the door, and when set, an explosion shall set out stronger than any other explosion ever set. Be careful." Both Gryn and Malneris entered with care, and made their way over the door, and entered the castle with ease. "I also bring a hound of mine," said Gryn. "His name is Caesar, and he shall keep us safe from invaders." "Excellent," said Saliera. But as time passed, Caesar the hound started smelling something, and he got near it. He walked upon a giant tree, which was upon the corner of the courtyard of the castle, and barked at whatever was in there. "What do you smell, boy?" said Gryn. And Caesar looked back at Gryn and insisted that there was something inside the tree. He had enough, and he went up to the tree, and he found there behind the tree a man full clad in leather armor, holding a bomb. The man went from behind the tree to the outside and yelled, "Long live Bethundu!" And the bomb detonated and made him explode into 1,000 pieces. The esteemed Caesar the Hound fell on the explosion too, for the explosion had reached him. Gryn, Malneris, and Saliera were safe, yet the first one was not on the same emotional scope as the other two. With a soulful scream, he cried for the death of his dog. His pleas for help resounded across the halls of Saliera. With a heart heavy with remorse, he held his sword to the sky and swore his oath, "I will not die before I slay everyone from the north and they crumble into nothingness." Gryn held up his sword, and so did Malneris and Saliera. Gryn calmed and cried and mourned for the death of his dog, who had served him well in his lifetime. 3 months might seem like a short time, but it is the lifetime of a hound. And so the three went into a long and winded quest of slaying every single northerner that they found. The target became everyone who weren't their folk, and one by one the Nolandians fell into darkness. Gryn's children fled the island for good, to be raised by other folk in their might. One after the other, they were all slain. The quest was on a dire end, for there were less northerners to kill. Gryn rode alone in the desert, and upon a hilltop there unfolded before his eyes a familiar figure. It was Selkar, holding a sword, ready for death. Wind there rushed the scene, and the sun was upon many clouds. "It is done, Gryn," said Selkar. "You and I are the last of Noland." "I don't want to do this, Selkar. I don't want to kill you," said Gryn. "Challenge me, or thou shalt die in battle," said Selkar. "I swore my oath, and it may be broken. I cannot do this, but I shall do as you wish, friend of old." "It is done, Gryn," said Selkar, "for I have the high ground, and there is no return. You cannot fight me from down there, you scum. Come over here, and your sword and your soul shall be no more." "So be it, old friend, but I am not to blame for your murder." And so it was. Gryn went up the hill and readied himself for combat. He put his sword in his right hand and looked upward, and there he was, Selkar, the man that he had known and he had loved ever since they were children, and now they were fighting for their lives. Gryn came to his mind and thought that it had all begun because of an incredibly debatable rivalry between the northern and the southern kingdoms. The rivalry was not personal, but merely because of their location in the map and the resources found of both lands. The north wanted the south's resources, and vice versa. However, no man from each side wanted to take the time to travel all the way down the island just to simply take the resources of the other kingdoms and be at risk of being killed. The rivalry was also ridiculous because according to Gryn's mind, everyone came from the same origin, meaning that everybody is each other's relatives. It wasn't worth slaying your brothers, even though you might have never seen them in your life. After these thoughts went through Gryn's mind, he began to weep. He fell upon the sand, and with his sword he knelt on the ground. Gryn told himself, how did it all come to this? And couldn't stand up. Yet Selkar did not share this feeling in the chasms of his heart. "Come on, you little girl," said Selkar angrily. "Slay me like a true southerner. Grab thy sword and push it through my chest." "No," said Gryn. I cannot do it, Selkar. You are my only friend, and I cannot bear losing you." "If you do not slay me, I shall kill the rest of your hounds, and I am not playing around this time, old friend. They shall be no more." This clanged the ears of the Southern King, for the loss of his dogs he couldn't bear. This made Gryn stand up and grab his sword hardier, and with more anger. He took his sword and put it to his front and charged into Selkar. He was taken by surprise and deflected the direct hit by moving to the right. He was pricked by a cactus that was too high on that hill. Gryn tried with great force to cut Selkar in the chest, but Selkar defended that hit as well. He charged back and moved tiredly. He pricked for the second and last time with the cacti. Selkar fell on the ground, but quickly stood up and grabbed his sword. Selkar defended another hit from Gryn, which came directly to Selkar's head. But it was too much for him to handle, and finally deflected the hit. Selkar was tired, and couldn't move his right arm where his sword was. Gryn charged one last time to Selkar, and stabbed his sword in Selkar's heart. His eyes became pale as fast as the fight had lasted. They looked at Gryn with such a remorse that no man nor woman had ever seen before, one that is never forgotten, even more so when Selkar blurted his final words before falling from Gryn's sword. "See you in hell, scumbag." Gryn couldn't speak. He was too scared to speak, as he knew he had made the wrongest of deeds against his best of friends. He threw his sword to the side and backed down. He looked at the body of the friend that had been the only soul that had befriended him in all his lifetime, and couldn't bear the pain of that soul to be no more. He knelt to his dead soul, and while his sadness and despair broke into one, the king of the Berglands kissed his perished friend on the forehead. Tears fell, thunder roared. I love you, Selkar." Gryn's voice broke amidst the grief that were upon his being. May God have mercy on you." Gryn took his sword and went over the cliff that was upon the outside of the duel area. He took the cacti that were in front of him with his bare hand and threw them to the side. He overlooked the horizon and the sky, which was filled with sand and all the buildings of the things that his kingdom had done, and what was left of it. The sky was overcast, and the sun shone from above the bluish and greyish clouds that were upon the sky. He took a final look at Selkar's body and wept again for the loss of his friend. He took his sword again and pointed it at himself, and he too took the morbid chance to leave the earth for the afterlife before stabbing himself in the heart and falling over the sandstone cliff, to be immortalized in his final words, "I will, friend." Galdson was a lovely king. He reigned his realm from fall to spring. He loved the land from plain to sand, and always carried a sword in hand. His hounds were dead, his soul was hewn, his sword and shield upon the moon. He rode his steed from north to south, his soul of all things was in drouth. But none remember where's his grave, for he died suddenly in darkness enslaved. And none remember his life of good deeds in Noland, where no greatness lives. Here is the end of the tale of Gryn Galdson. Appendix A of the House of the Galdsons. The House of the Galdsons dates back to the days of Sander of Eld, where among his many sons, he had a son named Hald Sanderson. He was born in the year I2 106, following his brother's Alessandro's birth in the year I2 105. In those days, Sander was the king of the kingdom of Nolrag, one of the four kingdoms that found itself in the great expanse of the plains of Tilgerand. Sander had a mission in his mind for a while, which was to reinstate the kingdom of Aldor, which his great-grandfather Andos had made and unmade in his lifetime. As to this, Sander decided to send his son Hald to the west, to see what he could find. Sander went together with him, in case something was revealed to them that was of valor. They traveled through the plains of Larfar, which were just to the north of the Great Wenmarsh, and just south of the perilous Snowbelt, and for 4 days they traveled until they arrived at the city of Kostlost. They sailed the ship to the west to see what they could find there. 3 days into the journey they sailed ashore onto a new island, which unfolded before their eyes, a giant desert and a mountain range on the horizon. Sander reasoned that he was the first man to set foot upon this island, and thus he named the island Sandersula, or the island of Sander. Later, by book rights, the island became known as Dersul, shortening the old name. Yet when Sander died in the year I2 140, he left his 3 sons to reign their own kingdoms. King Alessandro was the lord of the newly created kingdom of Arador, King Sanson became the fourth king of Nolrag, and King Hald was the lord of Tersul. In his kingship, he found that people already lived among the valleys of the island, and thus wanted to leave them to their lands. Thus he founded the kingdom of Noland, and its capital was the Berglands. King Hald Sanderson only reigned until I2 152, where he perished of disease, leaving all kingship of the Berglands to his only son, Hald Haldsson, in the year I2 153. In his kingship, he continued to build a capital, and he finished building it, and began founding the Tower of Ilsidor, a project in collaboration with an Eldorian mine named Sidor. King Hald had one son and one daughter, the son named Hald III Haldsson, and a daughter named Marian Haldsson. Both were born in the year I2 151, yet Hald III died in the year I2 220, 11 years before his father's death. Thus, when Hald died in the year I2 231, there was no other obvious heir to the throne to the Berglands other than Marian, making her the first ruling queen of the Minar in all history. But many people were against the rule of Marian, for many thought that a woman couldn't be able to rule a country, not even a country of such importance like the Berglands had. Some even quoted the old tales of history, that of the Belondemin, where by fault of Mainiel, the first two humans were destined to be killed by the Cassians. If the fate of a man has not cared for a woman, how could a kingdom be so? This chant resonated through the streets of the Berglands during the highest points of her reign. Then so it was that Marian banded together with men and women around her kingdom to fight against anti-feminist groups around the south of Tersul, and after a few years in the year I2 240, the Berglands became the first kingdom in Eordan to give rights to all women, the same rights that men have had ever since their dawn. Marian married and had one son named Shiagasud Halson in the year I2 178. The meaning of this name is unknown, but it was one that Marian liked. Unfortunately, Marian will die in the year I2 249 after health complications and of old age. She died at 98 years old. Her son Shiagasud will continue to live up to his mother's legacy, carrying on with liberal ideals to his kingdom, something that not all approved, but it was on the end decision for him to choose what to do with his kingdom. He gave women even more rights, and he freed slaves, especially the slaves that fled from the western coast of Elsar. But most of all, he expanded the kingdom a few hundred miles northward of the Great River, and conquering the lands of Guiomont and Nelgador. Shiagasud then had a son named Theoden Haldsson in the year I2 260. The free king died in I2 280 at the age of 102. Theoden Haldsson's kingship was most known for having the most control over the lands of the north. He didn't declare much of this time on his own lands, rather focusing on the new conquered territories that his father had gotten. For this, he was not a very popular king, but still managed to hold his power over the city of the Berglands. Other than that, he had a son named Shitain Haldsson, who was born in the year I2 301. Theoden died in I2 381 of old age. Shitain Haldsson's life was a tarnished one, for he dealt with one of the drafts of the Dark Lord Helion, years before his coming in the lands of Rulsar. Among the hearts of the people of the Berglands, the Dark Wind struck them with thoughts of rebellion and of evil deeds. A legion deemed by the Galdson as the Dersulian organization of Helionists formed in the year I2 379, with the objective of killing the king and his son. The attack lasted from May of that year to June of the next year. Theoden fled but was unable to get his son, and unfortunately Lord Shitain was killed in the final skirmish of the war, where he fought with the leader of the DOH, and both died. Shitain, however, had a son named Gald Haldsson, who was born in the year I2 341 and had gone unnoticed by the DOH. Galdsaln's first task as king in the year I-2 381 was to end with the DOH once and for all, and in the year I-2 382, no members of the organization remained. So it was that during most of his reign, a huge period of peace reigned over the entire land of Tersul. This allowed all people from the island to rebuild their lives and their steads, where they once used to live before the unwise counsel of the Dark Lord arrived. In the year I-2 391, Gald gave life to his son Balgor, named after the elvish lord of old. He decided he would change the last name of his family, now that the times before of the Dark Lord were gone, from Galdson to Galdson. And so Balgor's full name was to be Balgor Galdson. Gald died in the year I-2 433. Balgor's reign was not as important as the other kings. His reign was basically his mere existence maintaining the entire balance of power of his kingdom and the island, and thus for his kingdom he did not do much. He did establish relations with a king of the north, named Arkai, from the kingdom of Saliera. He had one son, named Heldorf Galdson, born in the year I-2 460. Balgor died in the year I-2 478. Heldorf Galdson's reign was too not as important, such as his father's. He maintained relations with Lord Arkai and his son Salar. He expanded the city of the Berklands from the year I-2 559 towards the death in the year I-2 561. He had given life to his son, named Gerleif Galdson, in the year I-2 543. Gerleif Galdson's life was a legendary one, for he had fought against bandits from the north for most of his lifetime. He had the virtue of being a strong warrior, just like Shitain of old. He maintained relations with Lord Salar, and even struck a deal to integrate the fortress into the kingdom of the Berklands. Yet that was in his later years when his strength now failed, and in the year I-2 641, he was killed by a group of 9 northern bandits, led by Lord Hendo of the land of Nelgador. He had given life to his son Gryn Galdson in the year I-2 624. Gryn Galdson's reign seemed to be the pacific one in the beginning of his days. Yet he had partaken in many deals with the northern people, especially those in the land of Diomond, especially with his friend Selkar Galdson. This brought a strong sentiment among the people of his lands, which brought in a rebellion, similar to that one of the DOH of old. Gryn Galdson was exiled from his lands, and in a traumatic event with his hounds and the Lord Salar's daughter, Saliera, Gryn Galdson went on a long quest to exterminate the northern people, a war known as the War of the Quest. During this time he gave life to his 2 children, one named Shiagasud II Galdson, and one daughter named Kipon Galdson, both in the year I-2 664. Gryn died along his longtime friend Selkar in the year I-2 666, becoming the last king of Noland. Appendix B of the writing of Gryn Galdson. Gryn Galdson had 2 children, one son named Shiagasud Galdson and the one daughter named Kipon Galdson. They were born as twins in the year I-2 664, 2 years before Gryn's death in I-2 666. While the War of the Quest occurred, Gryn assured his children were in safe hands, thus he didn't want them to get killed by the hands of the Southerners in a stir of confusion. Thus Gryn decided to send his children to King Wardos of Skandor, who had just 1 year before given life to his only son, Wulfgar. After the second Dunstar, 16 years later, when the twins were 18 and Wulfgar was 19, Shiagasud received a visitor who claimed to be a refugee of the War of the Quest, and was there to tell the stories of the Death King. The name of this visitor was named Malneris, purportedly a squire of the court of the Berklands. Thus it was that Malneris told all the stories of the Death King towards the son of the king. The stories of the old king were compiled into a book named the Sanore Gryn Galdson Il Kelvenka Burgdore, Scandorian for the tales of Gryn Galdson and his kingdom of the Berglands. While this occurred, after a life's love story, Kipon declared her love towards Emperor Wulfgar, and in the year I-32, uniting the houses of Galdson and of Scandor. Due to this, copies began to spring about the lands of Scandor and of the tale of Gryn Galdson, thus becoming a popular tale to tell around. Much did not occur during the age of Wulfgar that concerned the tale of the Nolandian king, all until the year I-1319, when Emperor Nushnum Maegnarsson of Scandor read the tale of Gryn Galdson when he was 20 years old. He questioned whether the Stone of Axela still remained of the old king's body after his death. He saw this as a great opportunity for him to gain an immense amount of power and knowing the might that the Stone of Axelas possessed. Thus he sent an expedition with himself included towards the lands of Noland, which by this time were abandoned and were lordless. He went the presumed desert that Gryn and Selkar supposedly died in, and there he found it, Gryn's skeleton, with a bright blue stone that shone across the sands. He took back the stone toward his lands and kept it safe for most of his life. He then left it as an heirloom to his son Aldor Kinning for him to keep in the fortress of Kelsai until it would be of further use. About the author. Leonardo Garza Ayala, 2007, is a Mexican-born musician and author born in Monterrey, Nuevo León, Mexico. Ever since he was young, he was interested in making stories about reality and fantasy, making doodles and small paper booklets. He began his writing career in July 2021, writing his first work, The Lost Kingdom, later that year writing its tragic prequel, The King War. 2 years later, on 2023, he wrote his 2 romantic novels based in 20th century Mexico, The Couple of the 42nd and its prequel, The Gunslinger Farmer. Currently, he resides in his humble home in Monterrey, writing away his tales and his poems.